Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Beis, Daf 2 of masechta Hagiga. Friends, exciting stuff. We're starting masechta Hagiga today. Is my chair? 1 second. Maybe that's a shtickle better. Yeah, we're starting masechta Hagiga today. That's exciting stuff. What is masechta Hagiga? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But essentially, masechta Hagiga. Who could tell me what the korban Hagiga is? We've come across the korban Hagiga from time to time. It's the korban. It's one of the korbanos that you bring on the 3 festivals. 1 second, my chair is like not gishmak. Yeah, it's like one of the korbanos that you bring on the Shalosh Regalim, right? So, okay, we'll get back to that in a second. So basically, Korban Hagiga talks about that, right? The korbanos that you bring on the festivals and when you go to Yerushalayim. And then the last bit of the masechta apparently talks about Tuma and Tara, which is probably not as exciting. But anyways, let's talk about the Hagiga thing for a second. So basically, there are 3 kinds of korbanos that you bring when you come to be Ola Regel, to be a pilgrim in Jerusalem on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And we've come across these different korbanos, here and there. But I think there's shtickle clarity over here a little bit, which is the Olas Re'iyah, the Shalmei Hagiga, and Shalmei Simcha. What are the differences? So the pasuk says, right, Shalosh Paim Bashana Yeroi Kol Zechurcha Lifnei, I don't know, Hashem Elokecha or something. So it says that all of your males will be seen. So there's an obligation to be seen before God in the Azara. And when we are seen before God, we bring a korban Olas Re'iyah. So that is a korban that all the men bring when they are Ola Regel. In addition, there's Shalmei Hagiga, which is on the first day of Yom Tov. Both the Olas Re'iyah and the Shalmei Hagiga are meant to be brought on the first day of Yom Tov. So the Shalmei Hagiga are shlomim that you bring, as the pasuk says, V'chagosem oso chag laHashem, and from which we learn that there's a korban Shalmei Hagiga, korban shlomim of Hagiga. And then finally it says, right, v'samachta b'chagecha, right, or smachta b'fnei Hashem Elokecha. I don't know, something about simcha. I think it's v'samachta b'chagecha. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? What is it? Let's see. 1 second. It says v'samachta b'chagecha. What do you want me to tell you? V'samachta. Akoponim. So you have to be happy. How you be happy? By eating animals. That makes us happy. So therefore, every day of the festival you should be eating meat. And that's what the idea of the Shalmei Simcha is. What's interesting about the Shalmei Simcha is that, the idea is that you're eating meat on the festival. Every day you should have meat to eat. Now, let's say you had you committed yourself to offering korbanos. You made a neder or nadava or something, and now it's the Shalosh Regalim, so you're going to offer it then. Okay, so you have meat from that, so you can just eat that instead. Or let's say you have Meiser Sheni, you could use money from Meiser Sheni to buy meat and eat that. The idea of Shalmei Simcha is just that you should have meat to eat. So you technically speaking, you can go to the festival without slaughtering Shalmei, without offering Shalmei Hagiga, and that could be fine because you had plenty of meat to eat anyways. However, the Olas Re'iyah and the Shalmei Hagiga, I don't know what I said a minute ago, but the Olas Re'iyah and the Shalmei Hagiga, you have to offer, and the mitzvah is to offer it on the first day of Yom Tov, right? Of course, if you didn't offer on the first days, you can offer it on the other days. Now, the Shalmei Simcha, so that's the idea there, is just to have meat to eat every day. And you don't necessarily have to offer it. If you have other meat, so then that's fine. Friends, let us jump in. So that is the Olas Re'iyah, the Shalmei Hagiga, and the Shalmei Simcha. Friends, Zok, the Mishnah on the first daf of masechta Hagiga, Hakol Chayavim B'Re'iyah. So everybody has an obligation to be seen before God in the Azare on the Shalosh Regalim, chutz micherishoy tevekain, with the exception of a deaf fellow, a foolish fellow, a minor fellow, a youngin, vitumtum vandroginus, these people who it's unclear if the boys or girls. Tumtim, it's doesn't have signs of being either a boy or a girl, and androgynous is signs of both a boy and a girl. So therefore, we're not clear if the gender is unclear. Additionally, women and slaves who have not yet been freed or who are not free. Hagiga and people who are lame and blind and sick and old. And somebody who's unable to go to be ola regel with his feet, because it says that shalosh regalim, right? That it's connected to regalim, to raglaim, to your feet. Ezu kain, what is considered a young fellow? Kol shenu yachol lirkov al kseifav shel oviv v'lalos miyushalayim laharbayis divrei Beishamai. Beishamai says that a little fellow who is potter from being ola regel is a little fellow who can't even go on his father's shoulders. He's too small that he can't even go on his father's shoulders, that his father will put him on his shoulders to take him to Harabayis. If he's too small for that experience, so then he's too young and he's potter. Basil says Basil kol she'enu yachol lechos biyado shel aviv v'lalos miyushalayim laharabayis shneimar shalosh regalim. That Basil has a little bit of a stricter interpretation there, that since the pasuk says shalosh regalim tachugli bashana, that you should celebrate these 3 festivals, and it says regalim, like feet. So Basil says that the little fellow has to be able to walk with his father, at least in some capacity, even if he's holding his hand, but still he has to be able to walk himself. If he's unable to walk, so then he is going to be potter from going to Harabayis. Beishamai says Beishamai re'iyah shtei kesef hachagiga ma kesef. Says Beishamai that the price of a olas re'iyah is 2 silver things, coins. Hagiga ma'a kasef, and the shalmei chagiga is 1 ma'a, is 1 silver coin, according to Beishamai. Basil says Basil ha're'iyah ma'a kasef, that the olas re'iyah is 1 silver coin. V'chagiga shtei kasef, whereas the korban chagiga, the shalmei chagiga, is 2 silver coins, according to Beis Hillel. Frag the Gemara, Hakol asuye mai. The Gemara wants to know when it says Hakol chayavin, everybody is included. Who? Okay, tell me who's this everybody that that we're coming to include? So la'asuye mishachetzu eved v'chetzu ben chorin, that even a fellow who is half slave, half free, he also has a mitzvah to go to Harabayis on the festivals, right? So let's say you have Reuven and Shimon, they own a slave, let's call him Levi, and Reuven decides he's going to free Levi. Shimon decides he doesn't want to free Levi, so he's half slave, half free. Now, the thing is, a slave is chayiv in mitzvahs to the same degree that a woman is chayiv, any mitzvah that a woman is chayiv in. So a slave is chayiv in, and any mitzvah that a woman is p'tura from, so then a slave is potter. Now a slave, meaning we're talking about a non-Jewish slave, an Eved Knani, so when he goes free, so then he becomes a yid, and he's and he's going to be chayiv mitzvahs like every yid. So if he's 50% Eved and 50% free, so then we're saying that even though he's 50% Eved, and the 50% Eved part would dictate that he would be potter, but the Chiddush over here, Hakol Chayav, and everybody, even this fellow who's 50% slave, 50% free, he would also have a mitzvah to a chiyuv to be ole regel and to be seen before God in the azar. Ravina, but one second, what about according to Ravina? The Ravina says, Mishachetzu Eved v'chetzu ben chorin, a fellow who is half slave and half free, potter min ariyah, hitake is potter from going to the azar and being seen in the azar. So then hakol asuyi mai. Well, then what is hakol coming to include? Then it's not including somebody who's half free and half slave. Lasuyi chiger biyom rishon v'nespash biyom sheni. You hear that, friends? It comes to include a fellow who on the first day of Yom Tiv he was unable to walk. So if he was unable to walk, we said a chiger, a fellow who's lame, he's unable to walk. So then he's potter from Re'iyah. But on the second day of the festival, he was already feeling better and he's able to walk. So we're saying that even though on day 1 he was unable to walk and therefore he was potter from Re'iyah, since on day 2 he's able to walk, so then what we're saying is hakol chayav, and everybody, even this fellow, is going to be chayav to be seen before God and to bring in olas Re'iyah. Hanich l'man da'amr kulan tashlumin zelazeh. But now the Gemara says, wait a second, that's not so pashut. Because it depends how you understand the obligation to bring in olas Re'iyah. Right? As I mentioned earlier, that the mitzvah to bring in olas Re'iyah and shalmei Hagiga is on the first day of Yom Tiv. Now, if we say that the obligation is the first day of Yom Tiv, and this fellow was unable to walk on the first day of Yom Tiv, and therefore he was potter on the first day of Yom Tiv, so he doesn't have to make it up. The mitzvah was the first day of Yom Tiv. The first day of Yom Tiv he was potter. That's it. He doesn't have to make it up. Right? So, now, it's a machlokas, right? The way I just explained it a second ago was one way of understanding it, that the mitzvah is the first day, and if you're potter on the first day, then you're completely potter. But the other way to understand it is that, well, there's a concept of tashlumin. Right? If you have a fellow who is able to bring the korban on the first day, but for whatever reason he can't, let's say it's Shabbos, right? You wouldn't bring these korbanos on Shabbos. So you could make it up the rest of the festival. So maybe we could say that the way that it works is that every day it has like its own obligation. Kilu, it's not that every other day when you offer the olas Re'iyah and shalmei Hagiga, if you hadn't already offered it, it's not that you're sort of making up for the fact that you didn't offer it on the first day, that it's all about the first day, and if you're potter on the first day, then you'll be potter, then you don't have to bring it at all. Rather, every day there's like its own obligation that if you haven't yet offered your olas Re'iyah and shalmei Hagiga, so then you can offer it on that day as well. Well, based on that, so if you have a fellow who on the first day was unable to walk, but then on the second day he's able to walk, so then that day he should offer the olas Re'iyah and shalmei Hagiga. So therefore, when we say hakol chayav in Re'iyah, that everybody is chayav in Re'iyah, we say that it's to include somebody who on day 1 was unable to walk, but then he's able to walk on day 2. Well, that makes sense according to the opinion that every day is essentially its own obligation to offer the olas Re'iyah and shalmei Hagiga if you haven't yet offered it. Again, this makes sense according to the opinion kulan tashlumin zelazeh, that every day is its own tashlumin. Great. But according to the opinion that actually when you can offer the olas Re'iyah and the shalmei Hagiga for the rest of the festival, if you haven't yet offered it, it's only making up for the fact that you didn't offer it on the first day, i.e. the ikr mitzvah is on the first day, and if you didn't do it on the first day, so you can make it up the rest of the festival. Well, if that's the case, well then, since on the first day he was potter, so then he doesn't need to make it up. So then hakol asuye mai. Well then, what is hakol coming to include? Right? We say it's not coming to include somebody who's 50% Eved and 50% Ben Chorin, because Ravina says that he would be potter. We're saying that, to say that somebody couldn't walk on the first day and then now he's able to walk on the second day, that's not necessarily according to everybody, because there is the opinion that the fact they're able to make it up is really just making up for the first day, and he was patur on the first day. So hakol asui imai. So what does hakol come to include? La asuye suma ba'achas me'enov, to include a fellow who's blind in one eye. That a fellow who's blind in one eye as a mitzvah to be seen before God in the Azar, udilo ki aitana, and not like the following Tana. The Tana is we learn in the Brisa, Yochanan ben Daivoy Omer Mishum Reb Yehuda Suma ba'achas me'enov patur min hariyah. That the opinion in this Brisa is that a fellow who is blind in one eye is patur, is exempt from Riyah, from being seen in the Azar on the Shalosh Regalim. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Yireh Yeroeh. Right? What does the pasuk says? It says Shalosh Paimim Bashana Yeroeh Kol Zechurcha. That 3 times a year your males will be seen. So it's read Yeroeh, but it's written Yireh. That right? So Yireh he will see, Yeroeh he will be seen. K'derech Shabbat Liros Kach Baleros. That just like God comes to see with his 2 eyes, so also he is seen by the Yidden with their 2 eyes. Maliros b'shteinov af leiros b'shteinov. Just like God sees us with his 2 eyes, so also he is seen by us with our 2 eyes. So therefore, Yochanan ben Daivai, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, says that a fellow who is blind in one eye would be patur from the mitzvah of Riyah. However, what we're saying is that our Mishnah would disagree and say Hakol Chayav B'Riyah, that everyone is included, even somebody who is blind in one eye. Now says the Gemara, actually, you actually could answer it like we said initially, which is that it's coming to include somebody who is 50% slave and 50% free, has a mitzvah to be seen in the Azar. And you're going to say, wait, but what about the fact that Ravina says that somebody who is 50% free and 50% slave is patur? So, lo kasha, it's no problem. Kan b'mishnah rishona, kan b'mishnah achrona. It depends if it was by the first Mishnah or the second Mishnah. What does that mean? It means that the opinion of Beis Hillel changed. Friends, maybe let's go weiter and then we'll come back to that. The Tananis we learn in the Mishnah, Mishachetzu Eved v'Chetzu ben Chorin. If you have a fellow who's 50% slave and 50% free, Ovid is Rabbu Yom Echad, so he works for, going back to our example, Reuven and Shimon jointly owned Levi. Right, Levi was an Eved Kanani. So Reuven decides he's going to free Levi. Shimon decides he wants to keep him. So Ovid is Rabbu Yom Echad v'Esatzmu Yom Echad. So he switches off. Right, Sunday he works for Shimon, and Monday Levi works for himself. Tuesday Levi works for Shimon. Wednesday Levi works for himself. Divrei Beis Hillel, that's Beis Hillel's opinion. Amru loim Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, what's going on over here? That's not nice. Takantem is Rabbu v'Esatzmu lo takantem. So while, that might work for Shimon, it doesn't work for Levi. Lisa Shivcha ino yachol. He can't marry a maidservant because he's 50% free. Paschorin ino yachol. He can't marry a free woman because he's 50% slave. Libato. And to just say, okay, fine, so you can never get married. The world was only created to reproduce, to have children. Shenemar, the Apostle says, I didn't create the world to be desolate. I created it to be inhabited. So therefore, so rather, in order to, fix the world, so we force Shimon to make Levi free, but Shimon doesn't have to sort of absorb the financial loss of losing Levi. And Levi then writes like an IOU to Shimon for half of his value, and he has to make that up to Shimon, right? So he's got to, pay himself off somehow, but he's effectively free. But he does nonetheless owe Shimon, his value. And Beis Hillel then agreed with Beis Shammai like that a fellow who's half slave and half free, so we force the master who's holding on, in our case Shimon, to free Levi. And therefore, going back to our example of Re'iyah, that if you have a fellow who's 50% slave and 50% free, because Beis Hillel already, ultimately, initially they said, well, he remains in his status of 50% slave, 50% free, and he works one day for himself, one day for his master, etc. But then, Beis Hillel then agreed with Beis Shammai that no, actually we forced Shimon to free Levi. So now, going back to Ravina had explained that our Mishnah, when it says that V'avadim she'enim meshuchrarim, that slaves who are not completely free, so they're pater from Re'iyah, that was only before Beis Hillel. This Mishnah was stated before Beis Hillel agreed with Beis Shammai that actually we would force Shimon to release Levi, and therefore it's Ke'ilu, we treat him free already. And if he's free already, obviously he's going to be chayiv to be seen, he's going to be chayiv in Re'iyah. And therefore, so yes, when Ravina explained our Mishnah to say that when it says V'avadim she'enim meshuchrarim, that slaves who are not completely free are pater from being seen, that was before Hillel admitted to Shammai. But ultimately Hillel admitted to Shammai, and therefore, to say that we would force Shimon to release Levi, and therefore we view it that somebody who's 50% free and 50% slave, we view it as if he's already completely free, and therefore he would be chayav to be seen in the Azara on the festival. And therefore when it says Hakol chayav b'Re'iyah, everyone's included in being seen in this Azara. That includes even somebody who's 50% slave and 50% free. And that next part that Ravina explains, that when it says Avadim she'enim meshuchrarim are pater, that was the earlier version of Beis Hillel before they admitted to Beis Shammai. But once they admitted to Beis Shammai that we would force Shimon to release Levi, so then Memele we treat it as though Levi's already free, and he would be chayiv in the mitzvah of Re'iyah. Friends, how's Hagiga going so far? It's pretty good, right? It's just kind of like Gemara-y, right? You gotta ask questions and answer them and stuff. I mean, we had, I feel like recently we've had a lot of Agadita kind of things. Okay, so the Mishnah had said that a fellow who's deaf or foolish or very small, youngin, so those people are pater from Re'iyah. Now, we lump together a deaf person, a foolish person, and a youngin. We lump them all together. Just like a foolish person and a youngin do not have the ability to comprehend, they don't have das. So we're talking about a person who's deaf and also is, because of his deafness, he's unintelligent. V'kamash malan kidetnan, and it's coming to teach us, our Mishnah is coming to teach us, like we learned in the Mishnah, that whenever we talk about a deaf person and assume that they're unintelligent, it's she'eino shomeh ve'eino medaber. It's because he's unable to hear and he's unable to speak. I.e., he was never able to hear, and because of that, he was never able to speak, and he was never able to develop sort of intellectually. Hamedaber ve'eino shomeh. But if you have a person who became deaf, so he's able to speak because when he was younger he was able, he was able to hear, he was able to speak, but then he lost his hearing later. Shomeh ve'enu medaber, or if you have a person who's able to hear but he doesn't speak for whatever reason, chayav, he would be chayav he would be chayiv to go to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so we're saying that when the Mishnah says a cheresh, it's specifically talking about a cheresh who doesn't hear and doesn't speak either. Tanina Ladutanu Rabbanon. So here we seem to have a Mishnah for that, which we learned in a brisa. Hamadaber ve'enu shomea, that if a fellow can speak but he doesn't hear, zeu cheresh. Okay, this is a person who is deaf. Shomea ve'enu medaber, a person who can speak and is unable to, a person who can hear but is unable to speak, zeu ilem. That is a mute. Zeh v'zeh arei ein kipikchin l'chol devreim. And both somebody who can hear, but somebody who could speak but cannot hear, or somebody who can hear but cannot speak, they're considered pikchin. They're considered intelligent. They're right. They're not considered like a chereshot of a cotton that we assume that they don't have any intelligence. No, somebody who can speak or somebody who can hear, so then they're considered intelligent. And how do we know that somebody who can speak but cannot hear is called deaf, and somebody who can hear but cannot speak is called mute? As the pasuk says, I am like a deaf person, I cannot hear, and like a mute who cannot open his mouth to speak. What does an ile mean? It means ishtikil milule. Ilem, ishtikil milule, that is, words have been taken from him that he's unable to speak. So we had just said that if a fellow is able to speak but cannot hear, or he's able to hear but he's unable to speak, so in both of those cases, so we said in those cases he would be chayiv, right? If he can't hear and he can't speak, so then he would be potter. But if he can hear but he can't speak, or he can speak but he can't hear, right, he would be chayiv, right? If he can't hear or speak, so he's potter. But if he could do one of them, then he's chayiv. Now, v'atani, but 1 second, we have a brayse that says medaber ben shomea, a fellow who could speak but is unable to hear. Shomea ben medaber, a fellow who could hear but he's unable to speak. Potter. So 1 second, it says there that he's potter. So on the one hand we're saying that they're chayiv. On the other hand we're saying that they're potter. Which one is it? So Ravina, some taka say Rava, chasure mechsor v'achi katani. Our Mishnah needs a little bit of massaging. It's missing some words. This is what it needs to say. Akol chayovin b're'iyah u'v'simcha. So everybody is chayiv to be seen in the Azara, in the Beis Hamikdash, as well as, right, and when you're seen, of course, you offer an olas re'iyah, as well as shalmei simcha, to be eating meat on the festival. Chutz mecherish amedaber ve'eno shomea, with the exception of a person who's unable to hear but is able to speak. Shomea ve'eno medaber, or somebody who's able to speak but is able to hear but is unable to speak. Shapoter min ha're'iyah, that they do not need to be seen in the Azara and offer an olas re'iyah. However, but even though they do not bring a olas re'iyah, they would bring shalmei simcha v'eshe'eno lo shomea v'lo medaber. But a person who's unable to hear and also unable to speak, v'shote v'kain, as well as somebody who's unintelligent and somebody who's a youngin, potter af min simcha. In that case, then they're potter even from shalmei simcha, holuf tur mikol mitzvahs hamuros b'Torah, since they're potter from all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Right? Somebody who has no intelligence, so then they are potter from all of the mitzvahs in the Torah. Tananami Hachi, we also learn in a brayse like this. Hakol chayovin b're'iyah u'v'simcha. Everybody is chayev in the olas re'iyah, the shalmei simcha, chutz mecherish hamedaber ve'eno shomea, except for a fellow who's unable to hear but he's able to speak. Shomea ve'eno medaber, or he's able to hear but he's unable to speak. All right. I hope I didn't confuse those. Sheptur min ha're'iyah, that they are potter from offering an olas re'iyah. V'afapisha potter min ha're'iyah chayev b'simcha. However, even though they're potter from olas re'iyah, they would be chayev in Shalmei Simcha, Veshe'eno lo shomea v'lo medaber, and if he's unable to speak and also unable to hear, v'shota v'ka'in, as well as a person without intelligence or a youngin, p'turin af min av simcha, then they are patur even from Shalmei Simcha, ho'il ufturim mikol mitzvahs amuros b'Torah, since they would be patur from all of the mitzvahs in the Torah. Wow, friends, alright, gewaldig. So that was daf Beis of masechta Hagiga. So first, of course, we learned about the concepts of the olas re'iyah, which is that every male has the obligation to be seen in the azara in the Beis Hamikdash, and also to offer an olas re'iyah at that time. Also, Shalmei Hagiga, on the first day of the festival, you offer Shalmei Hagiga, these Hagiga Shlamim, and then every day of the festival we want to, the people should eat meat and be happy, so then they bring Shalmei Simcha as well throughout the festival. We then ask, when it says Hakol, that everybody is obligated, so who's that coming to include? So first we want to say maybe it's including even somebody who's 50% slave and 50% free. Then we said, well, but Ravina doesn't necessarily agree. And then we said, well, maybe it's talking about somebody who on the first day was unable to walk, and then he was able to walk later on. So we're saying that, let's say he's able to walk on the second day, so he should bring these offerings on the second day. But we said, well, it depends how you understand the concept of tashlumin. Is it to make up for the first day, in which case he was patur on the first day? Or is it that every day you have an obligation if you didn't offer the day before, in which case he would be chayiv, but it's not necessarily clear. So then we suggested that it's referring to somebody who's blind in one eye, and the Mishnah is saying that even if you're blind in one eye, so then you would still offer the olas re'iyah and Shalmei Hagiga and also Shalmei Simcha. And then we went back to say that actually when it says Hakol, everybody, it's actually including, like we initially suggested, somebody who's 50% slave and 50% free, because we saw the machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, that somebody who's 50% free and 50% slave. Initially, Beis Hillel said that he would just work 50% of the time for the owner, for his, the person who didn't free him, and 50% for himself. But then Beis Shammai says that's crazy, because then he's kind of stuck in limbo. He's unable to get married, so we force sort of the 50% owner to free him. Therefore, we treat somebody who's 50% slave, 50% free, as if he's free, and that is why he has an obligation to the korban olas re'iyah. Then we had a discussion about what is a cheresh, right? So our Mishnah had mentioned that a cheresh is pater from olas re'iyah. So we said cheresh shota v'katan, somebody who is deaf, and we compare him to somebody who's foolish and somebody who's a child. The point being that we assume that his intelligence is not developed enough, and therefore that's talking about somebody who cannot hear and also is unable to speak. He was never able to hear, never able to speak. And we say that ultimately we said that there's a distinction. If he's unable to hear and unable to speak, so then he's like a shota and a katan, and he doesn't offer olas re'iyah, shalmei simcha, nothing. If he can hear but he doesn't speak, or if he speaks but he doesn't hear, so then he'll be pater from olas re'iyah, but he'll be chayiv in shalmei simcha. And somebody who can hear and somebody who can speak, so then chayiv in olas re'iyah and shalmei simcha. Friends, that was that Beis of masechta Hagiga. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.